and then I'll go into it again. All right, what we got going on then? I don't know what's happening. That should be all right. There's nothing about it that says it isn't. All right, good. Right, we'll get there anyway. That's fine. So it's Free Association Radio Show. It's the 25th of April, it is, isn't it? 4 months in already. Honestly, we're nearly at the end of the 4th month. Okay, so it's better. It must have been a Skype thing, I think. All right, so where was I? Psychological reversal we were talking about. And I've got a video. Actually, I've got a video I was going to play because it makes more sense than me talking about it. So I'm just going to do that, and then I'll talk about it after the video. I'm doing this from a mobile, so tell me if it sounds all right. I haven't worked out how to do this from Skype yet, so I'm just going to rely on old school technology of holding the phone up to the laptop.
What did Jack the Ripper and William Shakespeare have in common? Each man's life consisted of a moving force and energy that allowed him to create his own life. Jack the Ripper's energy took him in one direction, William Shakespeare's took him in another. This creative energy exists in each person's life and is like the flow of a river. Unblocked, it moves forward. Blocked, it turns and flows backward. This is the law of reversal. If an energy can move one way, toward creation, it can also move in the opposite direction, toward destruction. When you have psychological health, your energy moves forward smoothly and harmoniously. When this current is blocked, your energy, which has to go somewhere, switches and goes in an opposite direction. The current becomes destructive, and you start to tear down what you previously built up. When you lose your yes to life, when you become blocked in life, you become psychologically reversed. Depending on whether you are moving up or moving down in consciousness, you take on one of two opposing personalities, a Dr. Jekyll that loves and respects the world, or a Mr. Hyde that hates and is contemptuous of the world. When you're reversed, everything is turned upside down. You're in a state of perversion. You're negatively motivated. You act against your own best interests. You cut off your nose to spite your face. You throw the baby out with the bathwater. You're the one bad apple spoiling the whole barrel. When you're reversed, you become Mr. Hyde. Your mantra is waiting, hating, and hurting. Waiting, hating, and hurting. Waiting, hating, and hurting. Reversal, in its most simple form, means you feel irritable and out of sorts. You backpedal through life. Everything seems to annoy you. Mr. Hyde appears when your desire is blocked or thwarted in some way. Mr. Hyde is a reaction to your powerlessness to bring something about. When you are reversed, you lose your true desires. You say, if I can't be in a perfect relationship, I don't want to be in one. If I can't win, I'm taking my ball home. Thanks to evolution, you are programmed with a tendency to become reversed when you encounter an obstacle. Just as you are biologically wired to learn language, you are wired to become psychologically reversed. As a baby, when someone said no, you became unhappy, reactive, inhibited, and self-punitive. Reversal helped the species evolve. You are here today because your ancestors got reversed when they encountered obstacles. Once you go into reversal, your biological computer starts to process information from a powerless premise. You go into a primitive mode, a mode helpful for survival, but counterproductive for everyday life. When you're reversed, you project and seek out negativity. What Dr. Jekyll finds pleasurable, Mr. Hyde finds painful. Yet Mr. Hyde is drawn to and finds attractive all that Dr. Jekyll finds distasteful. In extreme cases, when your creative energy is turned upside down, you can even enjoy physically hurting yourself.
There you go. That's the simplest explanation I could find of psychological reversal, which is on a channel called the High C channel on YouTube. There's 4 videos, and I played about a third of the first video there. But interesting concept. Comes from the 1970s. Some research has been done since then. They seem to use it in sports quite a lot. So it's taking people out of thinking they can't do something and moving them into thinking they can do something in sport. It's moving through the boundary, through the belief system boundary, if you like. That's basically what it is. It doesn't seem that complicated once you know, but if you don't know the boundaries there, and you don't know you're reversed, all sorts of trouble can happen. Anyway, that's the basic idea. I found a video that describes emotional freedom technique in quite simple terms as well, so I'm going to play that one as well. It's all videos this week, simply because I haven't done videos on this show for a long, well, not at all really. So beginner's guide, here we go. This is from Stefan Gonich. It's 13 minutes long. I'm not going to play it all, but we'll get it.
Hi, my name is Body's Energy System. Now, the energy system I'm talking about here is the same energy system that acupuncturists use. Acupuncturists talk about there being 14 energy pathways in the body, which they call meridians. So the idea is that anytime you're experiencing a negative emotion, whether it's anger or sadness or fear or shame, these negative emotions are going to be caused by a disturbance in one or more of your 14 energy meridians. So how does EFT work then? EFT works by clearing out the disturbances in your meridians, your energy pathways. When you completely clear out all the disturbance in your energy pathways, you will notice that all your negative emotions go away. So in the simplest case, in the simplest sense, what you do is you intentionally focus on the negative emotions you're having, whether it's from a painful memory or something that's happening today. You will know at that point that there's energy disturbances in your meridians that are activated. And then you'll tap on a set of 10 acupuncture points, which are designed to impact all 14 meridians. And as you're tapping on these acupuncture points, this tapping process will gradually release the disturbance in those meridians, in all 14 meridians. And what you'll experience is that the negative emotions you're having start out to be very intense, gradually just drain away until they're completely gone, which can be quite an amazing experience. So, I talked about there being 10 acupuncture points to affect all 14 meridians. The reason why there's only 10 instead of 14 is that some of the acupuncture points are on intersections of 2 meridians, so they're able to impact 2 meridians at once. So we only need 10 to do all 14 meridians. So, what are the 10 tapping points? So let's go over those now. So the first tapping point is on the top of your head. And the exact location you can find by sticking your thumbs in your ears, being straight up, and then letting your middle fingers meet on the top. Now, in order so that we don't have to do that every time, what we're going to do instead is just pat the top of your head with all 4 fingers. Kind of like, wherever you're tapping and patting your head. Okay, that way you'll definitely get the point without having to worry about exactly where it is. Now, the way you do the tap in all the points is quick little thunks. So it's pretty quick. It's tap, 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 like that. And you want to do it firm enough that there's little percussion, that there's a little bit of percussion involved, which is why I call them little thunks, but not hard enough that you're going to get tender if you keep tapping there, but also not little feather touches either, just little thunks. So that's the first point of the 10. The second point is at the beginning of your eyebrow, on either side, it doesn't matter. And again, and for all the facial points, what I'm going to recommend you do is to use 2 fingers. So again, you won't need to know or need to worry about exactly where the point is. So at the beginning of the eyebrow, you would tap on it like this. Okay. The next point is on the corner of the eye, and it's on the bony socket right at the corner. It's not back here on the temple in the soft area. It's right on the bony socket corner of your eye is called the side of the eye point. The next point is below your eye. It's also on the bony socket, and it's right below your pupil. Now, people tend to drift out over here into the cheekbone, but it should be right below the eye. So the easy way to do this is use 2 fingers and have one finger near the slant of your nose and the other one next to it, and you'll be guaranteed to get the right point. The next point is an easy one. It's called the under the nose point, and it's under your nose, above your lip, right in the middle. So it's right here. Next point is called the chin point, but it's actually below the lip and above the chin in a little valley right in the middle. And the next point is called the collarbone point. This one's a little trickier. What you want to do is run your finger along your collarbone until you get to this little U-shaped depression in between the 2 collarbones. The point is actually right on that corner, right where the U depression is. But rather than trying to hunt around for it, again, we're going to use a simpler way of doing it. And I recommend you use a flat fist like this, right at the base of your neck, like this. That way you're guaranteed to get one of the points, maybe even both of them. Some people can also prefer padding with their fingers like this. Exactly how you do these, tap on your points actually doesn't matter that much as long as you get the right location. The next point is called the under the arm point, and it's on the side of your body. Under your arm, it's not in the armpit, it's a few inches below. For a man, it would be level with the nipple. For a woman, it would be in the middle of the bra strap. And you'll tap with all 4 fingers under your arm. So that's the under the arm point. The next point is called the wrist point. It's on the inside of your wrist. If you look at where your hand connects with your wrist, you'll see there's a line there. If you put your 3 fingers right below the line, then the tapping point is at the bottom of your 3 fingers, right where my wristband is. And to tap on that, you can just pat it with the other hand, like this. You can use a flat fist if you want. You can even use your other wrist if you want, so you get both wrists simultaneously. How you tap, again, doesn't really matter. The last point is called the karate chop point. We call it the karate chop point because it's the side of the hand that you would hit if you did a karate chop. So it's right on the side of your hand, and if you look at your palm, not counting the finger, but just the side of your hand, is right in the center. But rather than have to worry about getting exactly the right point again, the simplest way to do it is to just pat with all your fingers, like that. So those are the 10 points. Okay, so now how do we do?
There we go. That's enough of Goran for the time being. So that's basically the points that you would use in a fairly standard emotional freedom technique session. I only really use a couple of them. I use the karate chop point. I'm going to start using the point at the top I'm going to pat the top of my head as well this week. I've decided that that's a good point to use on because I can do that without distracting myself too much. The other ones are on my face, so if I'm talking, I don't want to tap on my face while I'm talking. It would be too complicated. So thinking about the psychological reversal thing, though, if you think about it, it's about when you're 2 or 3 years old and your mother or your father tells you, no, you can't do that. Don't do that. It's basically that's the first point where you get the boundary. So it's basically a tantrum. It's an internalized 2-year-old's tantrum, for want of a better way of looking at it, or a sulk. So it's a sulk that lasts 40 years or whatever, 20 years, 15 years, 5 years, 6 months, whatever it is. It can last a long time though. If you don't know that you're reversed, then how are you ever going to get out of it? Yeah, good thinking, crab cake. I never thought of that. It's just I'm not very good at multitasking. So if I'm trying to talk and I'm tapping at the same time, I would lose my sense of everything. It would just all go a bit pear-shaped. So I'm trying my best not to do the face points just because I'm talking at the same time. And I'm trying my best not to get into the emotion because it pulls out emotion for me if I do this for real. So I'm kind of just demonstrating now. I learned over the past month that if I do it for real, I'll end up taking myself to a place that I need to pull myself out of, and I'll lose my energy and my ability to communicate a little bit. So I don't want to do that. So I'm learning as I go along, but you get there in the end. Who knows how this stuff will work in the end? So the reversal thing. So the tantrum, the 2-year-olds having a tantrum when they're told no, you can't do it. So that's essentially, if you think about that on a huge scale, that's where people are with the lockdown at the moment. For me, I've seen people on the street over the last week, and there's more people on the street now. People are getting used to the idea that they can go out for a walk, like you're allowed to go shopping, you're allowed to go for a walk. People aren't staying in the house as much because the sun's come out, it's a bit warmer. And the people that are complaining are going to end up reversed if they're not careful, because it's hitting a wall. So instead of accepting the situation as just a situation, if you complain about it and you rail against it so too much, you're going to push yourself into that reversal and end up having a tantrum to deal with without even knowing that you've done it to yourself. So I'm a bit wary of that. So I don't like to complain too much. I still complain, but I don't complain to the point where it's all the time, because I don't want to push myself into a psychological reversal. Right, so back to the emotional freedom technique thing. We'll go through 5-10 minutes of it. So where am I going to start with this? I haven't worked it out beforehand, but we'll see. So just tapping the karate chop point, I use 4 fingers on my right hand, and I tap on the inside of my left hand. And the setup for this, I could go with resistance, go with resignation maybe. Try to see how I'm feeling just at the moment. Resignation. So resignation's a good word, and it's quite flat as a word. It comes out quite flat. So I'll go with that for the time being. So even though I'm resigned to the situation as it is at the moment, I'm not happy about it, but I'm going to just deal with it as it is. It is what it is ultimately. There's nothing I can do about it, so I might as well just accept it. So even though I'm in a place where I want to resist it and I want to complain about it, I wholly and completely love, honor, and accept myself. That's it, resignation, Crabgate. So even though I want to be out and about, the sun's coming out, we're up to about 14 or 15 degrees in Newcastle now, and there's regular sunshine for a good part of the day, so it's a good idea to be out and about, and I'm not being out as much as I would like. But I'm kind of just resigned to the fact that it's going to last another month. And I'm going to have to put up with it. And even though that's the case, I wholly and completely love, honor, and accept myself. So just take a deep breath after that round, see where we are. My voice is better than it was, I think. So we're moving in the right direction. I don't want to do too much emotional freedom technique this week, really, because we've done it 4 weeks in a row. So that's just an idea. Yes, the awareness and the acceptance, I think, Crabcake, are key parts of this. It's bringing it to a place where it's conscious, bringing the emotion to a place where it's conscious, naming it seems to help. Even if it's not the exact name that you would give to an emotion, it doesn't matter that much. It can be up or down the scale a little bit. As long as you give it some kind of name, it acts as a symbol. The name's a symbol that points to the emotion. So the name's the conscious thing that points to the subconscious thing that you're trying to deal with. So it doesn't. The words are important, but they don't have to be exact. So I don't really worry too much about naming emotions. I just go with what comes out of my mouth usually. All right, I'm gonna take a minute's break and just I've got a couple of things that I've brought with me. What have I got? There we go. Got some chocolate, and I feel like my throat's gonna be dry, so I'm gonna have a little bit of chocolate biscuit, I think. See how we do with that. And going back to the psychological reversal is a thing that I've come across fairly recently, but it makes sense. What we do in our philosophical groups is philosophical reversals as well. So if you think about psychological reversal as being one level, a philosophical level being above that, or being over the top of it, overarching in kind of semicircles. You put psychological reversal as a semicircle with philosophical reversal above it. The interesting thing for me is that no matter how much I tried to get myself out of the psychological reversal, I wasn't able to do it until I reversed philosophically. So the higher level, the conceptual level, the kind of underlying lifetime assumption. My lifetime assumption is I've spoken about this a little bit, but my lifetime assumption has been that the world is hostile up until about August last year, which is 54 years. It comes from having the measles when I was about 1 and 3 months old, so about 15 months old. Somehow that's trauma. The measles has traumatized me and set me up with the assumption that the world is hostile, and I've associated the kind of danger with people from the mind of a 1-year-old baby, basically. So that's been sat there deep in my subconscious for about 50 years. And I couldn't get at it. I didn't really know it was there. I knew something was going on, and I was trying to get at it psychologically, but I couldn't quite get at it until about a year ago. I started to dig into it. And eventually got there. So once I'd figured out it came from the measles, then it's a matter of looking at it from the position of a 1-year-old child, a very small child. How would a small child who's just had to deal with the measles, who doesn't understand the world, see the world after that point? So I had to literally kind of take myself back to being a very small child and look at the world from that perspective, and then trace my life through, trace the timeline through 50 years to look at the consequences of that assumption in my life. And it was interesting because it's like, even as a child, as a 7 or 8 year old, I remember watching the Vietnam War when I came in from school. My dad would have the TV news on, and the Vietnam War would be happening, and I knew there was some kind of obviously the Cold War was going on at that particular point in the early 70s. So I knew all of that was going on, even at 6 or 7 years old. And the fact that I've noticed the Vietnam War and the Nixon Watergate thing that was going on, even at 7 years old, I noticed that. I didn't understand it, but I knew it was happening. And then there was a miners' strike in the UK. There was a 3-day week. There was blockades. There was a point where, when I was about 7 or 8 years old, there was a point where there was only electricity for 3 days a week. So we had candles all around the house. And that went on for, what, 3 months or something? I don't know how long the 1972 miners' strike went on for, the 1974 miners' strike. But that was my environment when I was growing up. So all of those things reinforce the world is hostile as an assumption. So it's interesting how all those things played out. I mean, the world was quite hostile at the time, depending on your point of view. From the point of view of a child, I didn't really see it as a specific thing. It was just a general kind of underlying sense of hostility without actually being threatened. And then you take that through 50 years, and I just look at my life and I'm going, right, so I've interpreted a situation when I was 25 as a hostile situation, when actually I might have, if I hadn't had the measles and I hadn't had that assumption, I could have interpreted that situation differently. I mean, I'm not going to be able to do that because I didn't know about this at the time. So there's nothing you can do about it until you realize. That's the thing. If you dig in, you dig deep into your subconscious until you get to a place where you can get to the philosophical assumption, the key underlying assumption. And whatever it is, it might be something else for other people. I don't know. The only thing I was totally obsessed with this for years. Totally obsessed. Because I wanted to find out. I wanted to know what it was, what was going on. Because something just didn't feel right. Something wasn't right. And I didn't know whether it was me or whether it was the rest of the world or what was going on. Didn't have a clue. So in the end, you've just got to keep digging and keep digging and keep digging. Keep asking the questions. Keep looking for ways to solve the problem, however you define the problem. And then eventually it clicks into place. I don't know how it clicks into place exactly, but it just gets to a point where you go, all right, that's got to be it. And it makes sense at that point. And for some reason I've got feedback and I don't know why. Yeah, crab cake. It was interesting because it was like, yeah, the OPEC thing that was going on in the 70s as well, which is the energy crisis thing. That was mid-70s. Oil prices went through the roof. Inflation was 30% in the UK. I don't know what it was in the States, but in the UK in the mid-70s, inflation was like 27%, which is just ridiculous. So you've got that going on as well. So you've got globally, in the 70s, you had the Cold War, you had oil price inflation leading to general inflation of about 26, 27, 28%. You had civil unrest. You had labour unrest because people were sick of the way things were going. So the miners were on strike, the shipyards were on strike. At one point, the hospital workers went on strike at the end of the 70s. So all of these things were going on. And this is when I was growing up. So it all reinforces it gives you the underlying assumption. From the inside, I had it from the measles, and from the outside, I had it from civil unrest and union unrest and uh, all the other things that were going on politically. So the environment was hostile, and I carried along for somehow this trauma of the measles had got lodged in my nervous system or something. So I was carrying that, and it's being reinforced by the environment. So how am I supposed to know that that's not real as a child, as a teenager or whatever? How am I supposed to work out that that's not the way the world is? It's ridiculous to think that you can. And I would never have worked that out in a million years. Never have worked it out. So in the end, you do though. In the end, you do. And even when I moved to London, when I was 23 years old, I moved to London because I couldn't get any work in the northeast. So I was in Newcastle. I'd been unemployed for about a year. I was doing my best, but I couldn't find a job. So in the end, I had to up sticks and move 300 miles to London to get a job. I got there. My sister was at university in London when I moved, which made life a little bit easier because I had somewhere to stay. And I was down there for a rock festival anyway at Reading. So things kind of coincided and lined up to the point where that particular year, which was 1988, I'm talking about, when I was 23 years old, 22 years old. So I went to the Glastonbury Festival, which is Somerset, some friends, made the decision there that I was going to move from Newcastle to London. I couldn't make the decision in Newcastle for some reason. I had to be away from Newcastle to be able to think clearly about it. For whatever reason, the location made a difference for me. So I spent the whole weekend thinking about how I was going to do it. And it made sense that so Glastonbury Festival was the June of 1988. In the August of 88, there's a long holiday weekend. There's another festival at Reading, which is about 20 miles away from London. So I made the decision there at Glastonbury to move, to go down to London, look for a job, stay at my sister's while she was on holiday, sort my life out basically after the Reading Festival. I had a friend in Twickenham, Teddington. I rang him. He said I could stay overnight. So I went from the Reading Festival. I was muddy. I hadn't had a shower for 3 days. But I was ready to move. I was ready to changing my life at that point. So I rolled up to. I was staying at his sister's because he was living at his sister's. So I rolled up to his sister's. I'd never met her. Well, John said I could stay, so that was all right. I rolled up, but I was covered in mud, smelling bad, needed a shower desperately. So I got that sorted out. Then the next day, went to a friend of my sister's to get the key to her flat. Got into her flat. Within 3 days of getting to London, so I got to London on the Monday. By the Wednesday, I had a job sorted out. I went to the job centre, had a look on the board, rang two jobs I think I rang. Might have even just been the first one that I rang that said, come in for an interview. The Students' Union, the accommodation office. Middlesex University, the job was. So I got there. The woman who interviewed me was from Newcastle, which definitely helps. That's definitely been a factor all the way through. All of my jobs I've been interviewed or worked for people who had connections to the Northeast. It makes a big difference. Because there's an assumption of some kind of quality there, some kind of friendliness and preparedness to work, to do the job properly. And there's a support as well. There's a sense of supporting somebody from the region. So it makes a difference. So I worked in the accommodation office for a month, and within a week of starting that job, actually my sister came back at the end of that week. So I must have started on the Thursday on that. So I went to London on the Monday, started the job on the Thursday. On the Friday, spoke to the woman who was supervising me, who was managing the office. And obviously it's a student accommodation office. So most of the landlords there only take students as tenants. But there are a few that take people with jobs, normal people, ordinary people. So I ended up ringing one up. Chief suggested somebody. I rang him, went to look at the room in the house. So by the end of that week, by the Friday, I had a job and I had somewhere to live. So it's all a matter of things switching around. So that's a serious situational reversal. But it came from me making the decision to move to London, which was a tough decision at the time. I'm just going to get some water because my voice is starting to go. Give me 2 seconds. So the key psychological thing for me at that particular point, I'd been living on unemployment benefit for over a year. I was in a flat that was damp. I was sharing with a woman that I didn't really like. I didn't have very much money because I was living on benefits. And really, I was depressed. I went into a bit of a slump at that particular point. And I had to pull myself out of it. So I managed to pull myself out of it by making the decision to just up sticks and move. But I couldn't do that while I was in Newcastle. I couldn't make the decision. So I made the decision to make the decision at Glastonbury, which sounds a bit weird. But I wasn't clear enough about what I wanted to do to be able to make that decision in Newcastle. So for some reason in my head, it made sense that if I was already 300 miles away at the Glastonbury Festival, so it made sense to put off making the decision to move until I got to Glastonbury and then think it through properly. While at the Glastonbury Festival. So the block was about making the decision, but I managed to get around it by making a decision to make a decision when I wasn't in the location that was blocking me. So all a bit weird. I've never thought about it in those terms before, but that's pretty much what happened. Right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put on another little bit of that psychological reversal video. This is another 5 or 6 minutes we could probably put on. So we'll see what he said. Oh, that's the EFT video. Let me get the other one. Right, this one. Here we go.
Plato called creative forward motion the good. You are naturally good unless you become powerless and psychologically reversed. All the evil you do comes from being psychologically reversed and twisted. You have a dual nature. Your Dr. Jekyll side wants harmonious, unifying relationships with others in the world, while your Mr. Hyde side wants to separate from and make less of others in the world. One of the ways you can tell you're reversed is when you start to be contemptuous. Like Mr. Hyde, rage and destruction make you feel alive. When you're reversed, Mr. Hyde's contempt has the upper hand. You give in to your dark side and your shadow self emerges. Coming to terms with your reverse side and accepting your whole self, good and bad, is how you learn to transcend it. Whenever you're thwarted and believe you have no choices, you are at the risk of getting reversed. Reversal comes from loss of liberty, from perceived powerlessness. You think, I can't do what I want, or I have to do what I don't want. Criticism, rejection, frustration, and failure tip you into reversal. Thinking you're powerless, thinking I can't get what I want, is the potion that turns you from Jekyll to Hyde. Suppose you're driving down the road and come upon a large boulder in the middle of the road. If you press your nose against the boulder, you'll see no other alternatives. You'll see yourself as blocked and turn around and go back in the opposite direction. Viewing the boulder with your nose pressed against it is viewing the boulder from a lower level of consciousness. All you see is the boulder. In life, the fewer choices you see, the more likely you are to get reversed. That's why you want to look for a higher vantage point, a higher level of consciousness. You'll see over and around the boulder and be less likely to see yourself as blocked. If you are not blocked, there is no need to become reversed. You see you can eventually get what you want because you see ways to move around or rise above the boulder. From a higher level of consciousness, you see setbacks as detours rather than as dead ends. You keep moving forward and toward your destination. There is a very good reason to avoid reversal. Once you shift gears into reverse, you feel like you can only go in that direction. Even if you want to be friendly, you can't make yourself do it. Even if you want to lose weight, you force yourself to eat fattening foods. Reversal is like a bad horror movie where the car has been possessed by a demon driver who wildly drives in reverse, smashing into anything and anyone in the way. Once you get reversed, instead of trying to figure out the process, allow it to develop naturally and organically. When you run into obstacles, see them as friendly guideposts rather than as dead ends. Detours, which point out the path of least resistance, can help you get to where you want to go quicker. In mileage, your destination may be farther away, but by ignoring the detour, you end up mired in road hazards. To develop the habit of staying in a harmonious relationship.
All right, that video just jumped from part 1 to part 4 without me realizing it when I moved the phone around. So that's enough of that anyway. We can just have a chat. We've only got 4 or 5 minutes left, so let me see how I want to wrap this up. So I was talking about how to make a decision to reverse back into a positive. So if you can't get to a place where you can make a decision and it's the location that's stopping you, it's the surroundings, it's the environment, then the easiest way from my experience is to book a trip somewhere and take a day out, make the decision somewhere else that isn't that environment. Yeah, crab cake, there's a lot of projection, a lot of transference all over the internet. All over the internet. It's not just here. It's every chat room in every website and most YouTube videos and transference for people who don't know. I don't know whether I can define it properly, but it's reacting from a memory, reacting from a traumatic memory, and being triggered by the current situation because it's a reminder of a traumatic situation. I don't know whether that's a correct definition, but it's the best definition that I've got. So the emotion that comes out isn't appropriate to the situation because it's being stuck. So this again it's a reversal idea. You can view it through this concept. So if you're traumatized as a child or a teenager or whatever, you hit a situation where you can't go forward, so you have to go back into yourself, so your energy doesn't flow. Your creative energy, so it starts to flow backwards, for want of a better word, starts to become a negative creation rather than a positive creation. And then later on, maybe 15, 20 years later, you meet somebody and there's something about that person that reminds you about previous trauma. So you overreact in that situation because it's pulling up the old memory, the old trauma. And at that point you can go into what's called a trauma loop. Again, I don't know the official psychological definition, but it basically means screaming at people and getting out the old emotion, but not being able to move on from it. That's what a trauma loop is, really. It's releasing the emotion, but going back around and back into the trauma again. And then pulling out more emotion, but not being able to get past it. So I'm going to have to look up a little bit more about trauma loops because I don't know enough about them to talk about them, really. I went through one a couple of years ago, so I know about them from experience, but I don't know the technical, psychological definitions. Anyway, at that point, we've got about 2 or 3 minutes, so I'm going to start to wrap up. We covered a fair bit. I've had a bit of fun today as well. I didn't know I was going to end up talking about moving to London. That's a surprise. So that's quite interesting. But just a reminder that Revolution Radio is listener supported.